Minister, it would appear not. Please respond.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks to the member. With respect to the first question, what the recommendation is that when the United Nations Security Council passes resolutions, the expectation is that those resolutions are given effect in Jamaica immediately, within, I don't want to quote it, like 24 hours, like immediately. And so that's how countries, to answer your specific question, that's how countries get placed on it. It's United Nations Security resolutions. With respect to recommendation 8, yes, recommendation 8 will require charities to be automatically registered, whether or not they're seeking tax exemptions. But the registration comes with obligations. Once you're registered, the charity will have to file statements on income and expenditure on an annual basis. And I think financial statements prepared by accountants registered with the ICAJ.
Related to the recommendation 7, is it that these countries are considered to be either financiers of terrorism or related to activities that would be considered in the category of being supporters of terrorism?
Minister?
Yeah, so the framework, remember, is anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism. I don't want to necessarily be drawn into making a statement on these countries in particular, but what we're saying is whenever the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council passes a resolution with respect to money laundering or countering the financing of terrorism or proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, it is Jamaica's international obligation is to ensure that those standards, those resolutions are given effect in domestic law immediately.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, members. Announcements? Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. The Integrity Commission total annual emoluments exempt from statutory declaration requirements order 2023 and its resolution under the Integrity Commission Act. The Integrity Commission's reports of investigation into concerns that the following employees of the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, KCMC, failed to submit their statutory declarations to the Integrity Commission for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021 in breach of the Integrity Commission Act. 1, Ms. Cheryl Robinson. 2, Mr. Donovan Thompson. 3, Mr. Jovan Davis. And 4, Mr. Dwight McLeod.
Bills brought from the Senate. Minister of Agriculture. Who doing it? Oh. House Leader, we will end up needing to recommit bills brought from the Senate. We will continue. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
No. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. The Integrity Commission total annual emoluments exempt from statutory declaration requirements order 2023 resolution. Whereas Section 39(1) of the Integrity Commission Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, requires parliamentarians and public officials to submit to the Director of Information and Complaints of the Integrity Commission, subject to the provisions of the Act, a statutory declaration of asset, liabilities, and income in the form set out in the third schedule of the Act. And whereas Section 39(2) of the Act provides that Section 39(1) of the Act shall not apply to a public official who is in receipt of total annual emoluments of less than $3,500,000 or such other amount as may be prescribed by the Minister, subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives. And whereas on the 18th day of December 2023, the Minister made the Integrity Commission total annual emoluments exempt from statutory declaration requirements order 2023. Now therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Integrity Commission total annual emoluments exempt from statutory declaration requirements order 2023 resolution. The Integrity Commission total annual emoluments exempt from statutory declaration requirements order 2023, which was laid on the table of the House on the 19th day of December 2023, is hereby affirmed. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you. Next member. Minister.
Yeah, thank you. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Number 3 Act of 2023.
Madam Speaker.
Next member.
Madam Speaker, whereas there's a large and growing number...
Member, would you be so kind as to hold? You have not yet had permission for your motion. Still doing a review. So could you turn your mic off? We're going to go first with the member minister who is on the agenda, and then member from St. Andrew West? Southwest. And we're just wrapping up member Jackson, the member from St. Catherine South. As you know, some review was required for aspects of your motion, and I'm trying to just complete before allowing you to take your seat, to stand. If, in fact, we are not complete, I will happily have a recommittal today so that your motion may be entered into the records. So, go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move, be it resolved that this Honourable House is desirous of reviewing the Domestic Violence Act, and notwithstanding Standing Order number 7(6) subsection 1, this Honourable House appoints a select committee comprising the following members. 1, Honourable Olivia Grange, Chair. Mr. Dwight Sibley's, Mr. Mika Davis, Honourable Marlene Malahoo Ford, Dr. Michelle Charles, Ms. Denise Daly, Dr. Angela Brown Burke, to sit jointly with a similar committee to be appointed by the Honorable Senate to conduct the statutory review of the Act and report its findings to this House. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from St. Andrew Southwest.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Motion for the reaffirmation of Jamaica's commitment to justice, freedom, self-determination, and defense of human rights. Whereas Jamaica has been a member of the United Nations since its independence in 1962, and whereas since taking its seat at the UN General Assembly, hereinafter referred to as the General Assembly, Jamaica, under succeeding administrations, did so with its heritage of a strong commitment to human rights, equality, self-determination, and justice for all peoples, embodied in its motto, out of many, one people. And whereas in the exercise of its right to speak as a nation-state, Jamaica, at the General Assembly, has fearlessly done so in favor of justice, freedom, self-determination, and human rights of peoples of all color, creed, and religion with relentless consistency, thereby recording its vote in the General Assembly on the right side of history on each occasion. And whereas on October 27, 2023, the United Nations General Assembly Resolution A/ES10/121, this being a humanitarian ceasefire resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, was introduced by Jordan. And whereas the resolution calls for, in quotes, immediate, durable, and sustained humanitarian truce leading to a cessation of hostilities, end of quote, and condemns, in quotes, all acts of violence aimed at Palestinian and Israeli civilians, end of quote, and demands that all parties immediately and fully comply with their obligations under international law, among other things. And whereas the General Assembly voted, with Jamaica recorded as being absent for the vote, and whereas October 2023 marks the first time Jamaica failed to vote for justice, freedom, self-determination, and human rights since taking its seat at the UN. And whereas Jamaica, not being present for the vote and having no vote recorded, has damaged its prestige and image in the rest of the world, be it resolved that this Honorable House of Representatives reaffirms Jamaica's irrevocable opposition to apartheid, racial discrimination, and its fearless and relentless commitment to justice, freedom, self-determination, and human rights of peoples of all color, creed, and religion, and joins the call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza in respect of the human rights of the Palestinian citizens. And be it resolved that this Honorable House affirms Israel's right to exist and also recognizes the right of the Palestinians to self-determination and to defend themselves in accordance with UN resolutions 3236, 3743 of 1982, and 3314. And be it resolved that this Honorable House calls on the government of Israel and Palestine to immediately enter negotiations leading to a peaceful withdrawal of Israel from all occupied Palestinian territories in compliance with all the resolutions of the United Nations, including this which calls for a ceasefire in the Gaza conflict. And be it further resolved that the nation of Jamaica recognizes the state of Palestine as a sovereign nation with sovereignty over the internationally recognized Palestinian territories as per the 1967 UN recognized borders to include the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip.
The member from St. Catherine South.
Thank you very, very, very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice of the following motion. Whereas a large and growing number of account holders at banks and other financial institutions in Jamaica have been experiencing substantial losses of nearly $1 billion from their accounts. And whereas many account holders are experiencing difficulties in recovering those losses at the banks and other financial institutions. And whereas, in many instances where the reported losses or portions thereof are returned to their accounts after many months, during such period of severe hardships are experienced by such persons. And whereas the Banking Services Act of 2014, under Section 36, states that every director, officer, and key employee of a licensee shall, in the discharge of his functions, act honestly and in good faith in the best interest of the licensee and for the protection of depositors' funds. And B, where exercise the care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent director, officer, or key employee would exercise in similar circumstances. And whereas all banks and other financial institutions in Jamaica have sought to discourage and reduce services inside the banking halls and have been encouraging the use of automated teller machines or their equivalent outside their facilities, and whereas many banks have elected to close many of their branches across the country, and whereas most government and private sector employees can only access their salaries from designated bank accounts to meet their day-to-day expenses and other financial obligations. And whereas many of the automated teller machines or their equivalent regularly malfunction, causing inconvenience, difficulties, and hardships to account holders. Be it resolved that the Economy and Production Committee of the House of Representatives convenes a meeting with the relevant representatives of the Bank of Jamaica to investigate the magnitude of the losses to account holders, banks, and other financial institutions, and with a view to determining what steps can be taken in an effort to mitigate the negative impact on account holders of the licensees of the Bank of Jamaica, and that the committee convenes meeting on this motion within 40 days of the motion being referred to the committee. Be it further resolved that the BOJ establishes minimum service standards for the operations of the automated teller machines or their equivalent by its licensees with accompanying sanctions where none currently exist. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, members. Member Jackson, would you be so kind as to approach and please carry the document you read from? House, just for your information, the motion has to be read exactly as approved, written and approved. So if the member has an additional copy that was subsequently edited, the final version signed by the Speaker is the motion that is required to be read. So Member Jackson is just going to reread. No, he had a different copy. It's not that he cannot read. He reads very beautifully. Member Brownberg.
Madam Speaker, I thank you for those instructions. The fact of the matter, members, I had edited one section to make a provision which was not carried on the copy that the Speaker got and signed on. So it's not a major thing. It can be dealt with in the thing, so I won't make an issue of that. So I will reread the one that was signed off on without the addendum. Madam Speaker, the motion reads, whereas a large and growing number of account holders at banks and other financial institutions in Jamaica have been experiencing substantial losses of near $1 billion from their accounts. And whereas many account holders are experiencing difficulties in recovering their losses at banks and other financial institutions, and whereas in many instances where reported losses or portions thereof are returned to the account holders, accounts after many months. During such period, severe hardships are experienced by such persons. And whereas the Banking Services Act of 2014 under Section 36 states, quote, every director, officer, and key employee of a licensee shall, in discharge of his functions, A, act honestly and in good faith in the best interest of the licensee and for the protection of depositors' funds, and B, exercise the care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent director, officer, or key employee would exercise in similar circumstances. And whereas all banks and other financial institutions in Jamaica have sought to discourage and reduce services inside the banking halls and have been encouraging the use of automated teller machines or their equivalent outside their facilities. And whereas many banks have elected to close many of their branches across the country, and whereas most government and private sector employees can only access their salaries from designated bank accounts to meet their day-to-day expenses and other financial obligations. And whereas many of the automated teller machines or their equivalent regularly malfunction, causing inconvenience, difficulties, and hardships to account holders. Be it resolved that the Economy and Production Committee of Parliament, the committee, convenes a meeting with the Bank of Jamaica to investigate the magnitude of the losses to account holders, banks, and other financial institutions, and determine steps to be taken to mitigate the negative impact on account holders of licensees of the BOJ, and that the committee commence meeting on this motion within 45 days hereof. Be it further resolved that the BOJ establishes minimum service standards for the operations of its licensees with accompanying sanctions where none currently exist. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Questions and answers to questions? House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I now ask for recommittal of the item bills brought from the Senate.
Members, the question is that we recommit bills brought from the Senate. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister of Agriculture, Mining, Agriculture and Fisheries. You're here? All right, we are. See, the clerk will read first.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. To the Honorable House of Representatives, I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 15th day of December 2023, the bill entitled An Act to Amend the Public Debt Management Act to borrow monies for pre-investment project planning and development activities and for connected matters was passed in the Senate without amendment. Also, I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 15th day of December 2023, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Agricultural Produce Act was passed in the Honorable Senate with 8 amendments for which the Senate desires the concurrence of the Honorable House. And the amendments have been circulated, but I'll read them into Hansard. In Clause 3, Section 2A, 2A is amended by deleting the word owned and substituting therefore the words owned or occupied. Clause 3, Section 2A2 is amended by deleting paragraphs C and substitute and renumbering paragraph D as paragraph C. Also in Clause 3, Section 2B, 2A is amended by deleting the word owned and substituting therefore the words owned or occupied. Clause 22, Section 11 is amended by deleting the word inspector and substituting therefore the words chief inspector of produce. Clause 24, Section 23(1) is amended by A, renumbering paragraph M as paragraph N, and B, substituting therefore the following as paragraph M. And M should read the removal or addition of any article of agriculture produced from the 3rd, 4th, or 5th schedule. Signed, Thomas Tavares Finsno, JCD, KCJP, President of the Senate.
The amendment should have been circulated, Opposition Leader. I'm just checking with the Marshal and orderlies what has happened. We will resolve in short order. Not yet. Minister, the copies of the amendments apparently have not been circulated as we thought they were. Just hold a moment. Do you have any extra copies there with you? Opposition Leader, are you and the members from, because the spokesperson doesn't have a copy either. I am aware, so I wanted to ask whether or not you're comfortable with the minister proceeding or... Minister, we're just going to continue the agenda until the documents come and then we will recommit. Questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business, House Leader. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
House Leader, you can understand. Former House Leader heard House Leader and he said, I'm ready.
So, Madam Speaker, I will use the opportunity to the naming of the Joint Select Committee to review. It's okay. So, Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
So, Madam Speaker, this will not be a long debate because I had indicated on many occasions when I spoke in the House in dealing with matters that affect our women, our girls, our boys and our girls, regarding the Joint Select Committee being established to do a full review of the Domestic Violence Act. Last week when I spoke, the Leader of the Opposition also indicated a similar desire, concern, that the Joint Select Committee would be set up. I thought I was being preempted somewhat by the Leader of the Opposition, but we are at one in this. So it's not a matter of a one-upmanship or a one-woman-manship, right? But just to say that I'm happy at this time that I'm in a position to name the Joint Select Committee, and I've had full cooperation from the opposition, where they have indicated their members. And I was looking at the report from the 2017 Joint Select Committee, and the number of persons who are now sitting, who will be sitting on this Joint Select Committee to review the Domestic Violence Act were members of the Joint Select Committee, including the Leader of the Opposition at the time. You were a member of that Joint Select Committee. You remember? He remembers. So, at that Joint Select Committee, concerns were raised about the need to strengthen the institutional framework and arrangements for the more effective operation of the Act. And so, we intend to do a full review. And that full review may even go to the point where we will repeal and come up with a new Domestic Violence Act. But I'm satisfied that the membership is an excellent team, and we will follow the processes we always do when we have Joint Select Committees. And I am very pleased today to ask that this motion would not need a long debate. I invite other members to make their contribution, after which I will conclude. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister, the House is a little bit confused, which is why Member Hannah came up. So, look back at the agenda for public business. I think instead we should have there the discussion would be just on the domestic.
My prompt has indicated the naming of the Joint Select Committee to review and report on the Domestic Violence Act. 2 items under public business. That is what my...
So here is the challenge, Minister. It should not have said 2023. 2023. Right, and I'm saying the review of the old act, the way it is written on the agenda. Look below for the naming of the joint select. Naming of the joint select, Minister, gives so the confusion is on the agenda, the naming of the joint select is just to review the Domestic Violence Act, which my understanding is that's the old act. And that is why the member was confused.
My understanding is that the minister intends to close the debate that was started last week on the Domestic Violence Act. Amendment. And that subsequent to that, a joint select committee which has been named now to review the whole thing, the entire act, as amended. So we expect after this debate to go to close the other debate, at which time the member from Southeast St. Andrews.
I am clear, and that was what was confusing Member Hannah, because the argument that you're closing a debate when you're then putting a joint select committee, she's expecting that she would be party to the debate, and quite correctly so.
So, Madam Speaker, as I had indicated before, that the Joint Select Committee to review the Act, to do a full review of the Act, that is the committee that is now being established. And
Minister, hold on a moment. Member Hannah, you are clear?
Well, Madam Speaker, maybe I should be allowed to complete my comments, and then it probably will be very clear. Yeah, let me explain. Let me explain. There are two items here. One item under public business is to complete the debate on the amendments to the Domestic Violence Act. These are about 5 or so amendments, which are immediate and urgent. And we will complete that debate today, so we can treat with matters that are urgent, that has to do with the abuse of our women. The other item is to set up a joint select committee to review the act itself, and to review the act itself, which may be coming out of that review. We may repeal it and come up with a new Domestic Violence Act. So it's not confusing. They're two different things.
No, Minister, what is confusing is that the agenda is incorrect. The agenda should have read, Member Hannah, naming of a joint select committee to review and report on the Domestic Violence Act. That's what it should have said.
Not be there.
That's what it should have said. And yes, if that was written there, Member Hannah would have been very clear. So the prompt is correct, Minister, but she was reviewing the agenda, which started the confusion. So the agenda was incorrectly written. So, Minister, take it away.
All right. So Madam Speaker, I think it's now clear to everyone that we coming out of the Joint Select Committee report of 2017, it was recommended that we have a total review of the old act. That is now being done, where we are setting up the Joint Select Committee to do that. In fact, the leader of the opposition last week confirmed that this was being contemplated. And as the minister responsible for gender, I made the decision that instead of waiting until next year, when we resume to appoint, to move the motion, I decided that I would do it today. And so, Madam Speaker, I am happy that we are all at one in this regard, and I invite other comments. Thank you.
Minister, we have no objection, so you can proceed.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, Now that we have concluded the debate, I ask that it be approved.
The question is that the motion for the establishment of a joint select committee be Yes, she had read the motion, be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Joint select committee has been established. Minister, you will now we'll do the same and just close because I know it is not as tidy as we would want it. So, Minister, once again, so we have closed on a joint select. In respect of the debate, are you closed? Are there any more comments? Any more speakers?
Madam Speaker, just for clarity, what am I speaking on the debate now, the amendments on the debate? And I apologize for my what appears to be humor, because this is not a laughing matter. But it certainly is. I think sometimes all of us come here and we get caught up in the procedural aspects and forget the gravamen. But I thought it was important, Minister, that those of us who have had to deal with, even in our constituencies, women from time to time, and men, who go through gender-based violence and domestic violence, lends their support to the bill, whether it will be this bill with the amendments or other bills. Madam Speaker, I crave your indulgence because one of the things that the current bill says, and the amendments that were brought forward suggests, is that other people can bring forward a report on those who have been abused. I remember some time ago, there was, maybe a couple of years ago, there was a video that came across my social media feeds. And a woman was being beaten severely by what appeared to be her intimate partner in the middle of a community square with a rock in her face. And she didn't move. She was being held very firmly by him and being beaten in her face. And a lot of us had outrage, Minister. And I found at the time she was DSP Novelet Grant and asked if we could identify or find the community where this young woman was. We invariably found her, and counselors went in, the police went in, and the lady decided, it was a young woman, she decided not to press charges. And the reason why she did not press charges is, I think the counselors presumed that she was afraid, she was being victimized for so long that I don't think she understood the difference between physical abuse, love, support, and whether or not there was a thin line between, boy, if him not lick me, him not love me. And I found as a representative, and certainly as a Jamaican, that the narrative between some women and some men in intimate partnerships is just like a slap, or if him not lick me, him not love me, or just go on, man, it's just, I do it because I love you. I slap you because I love you. And these are serious situations. And domestic violence in Jamaica doesn't discriminate. It comes in all forms. And if you look at the data, 1 in every 4 women report, Madam Speaker, that they have been subjected to intimate partner violence. Nearly 50% of our women between the ages of 15 to 24 say that they have been coerced into sex for the first time. And so if you have this kind of situation permeating the society, you realize that there is maybe a culture of abuse, whether sexual or physical abuse, in our country. This is why the bill is so important and why the bill has to have teeth. But, Minister, it has to have teeth on several levels, because while it is important for persons to be able to report if someone else is being abused, and the fines are harsher, and the police have a responsibility. If the person who is being abused has nowhere else to go, that is a problem. And so in my contribution to this part of the debate, and I'm not sure what the Joint Select Committee will come up with, but certainly for this part of the debate, is the entire country has to buttress itself around how to take care of persons who suffer at the expense of violence in their domestic situation. So that you don't have a situation where a mechanic murders their girlfriend and goes back to work, or a wife gets beheaded, or the parents of a young woman from Teachers College, a recent graduate or a teacher, says that they were warning their daughter and then the child ends up dead. It's a kind of situation that we talk about too many times. And so, Minister, I'm supportive of the bill, but I want to see this bill buttressed by all the other infrastructure. I know in particular that your ministry had designed one place of shelter for women who experience violence, but it can't only be one. So, Madam Speaker, if we are really serious about making this bill well, the bill will be implemented at some point, but if we're making sure that once this bill has teeth, that our women are comfortable at all levels, that if they make a report, or if someone else makes a report, or if a man makes a report, because this might sound like tongue-in-cheek, but there was one of our colleagues who made a report in here that the woman was actually beating him, and when the surveillance camera picked it up, it was actually the other way around. I won't call the person's name or the constituency, but we all know who it is. But in the same way, when a young man was thought that he was being given bun at UWI, him take the iron and burn up his girlfriend on the campus and tied her up for days. These are the kinds of heinous things that we're experiencing now in Jamaica, and I don't know that even we recognize that we have the second highest rate of killing of women per capita in the world. That's serious. Huh? Femicide. Well, a lot of persons, the opposition leader, don't really remember the word femicide, but it's true. And so, Minister, I urge you to bring the bill quickly. And I urge you that rather than repeal the bill, whether it needs additions, amendments, that we do those. Because this is long. This has waited too long in coming. And so, Madam Speaker, while we support the tone and the tenor of the bill and its necessity and its urgency, I would urge that the Parliament sees this as one of its most important bills that we will pass in this cycle, because it will give women not only a respite, but it will give them, and men, it will give them some comfort in recognizing that as legislators, we are really serious about their safety. And that if they don't feel they have anybody else that they can turn to as a victim of abuse, they can turn to the law. So, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I support the bill, Minister, and I urge that you get it done very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. The member from St. Andrew West Rural.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also stand in support of the amendment of this bill. As you heard my colleague mentioning some statistics, those are real. Our Jamaican women, according to the United Nations, our Jamaican women are the second on the list of those most likely to be intentionally killed, mostly by a partner. And also the statistics showed that last year, Madam Speaker, nearly 2,500 males reported domestic violence cases to the DVICs, and on the female side, we had over 6,221 reports, which brings that total to approximately 8,714 of the total recorded, and that's just recorded. These are just people who actually recorded. There's so many, this was in 2022, who do not report domestic violence because of fear, because of many different reasons. And we all know that domestic violence can have a profound effect on an individual. This scar lasts a lifetime. You know, again, we know that in Jamaica, we have heard from time to time persons saying, and as my colleague said, you know, if he's not hitting you, he doesn't love you. And it is a culture, we must get out of that. We have to bring more into focus what domestic violence can do, what it is doing to our country, and seeing the data that 1 in 3 persons in Jamaica experience gender-based violence, we have to pay close attention. And I'm so, this afternoon, Madam Speaker, I'm really happy that the ministers brought these urgent amendments forward. I'm particularly, you know, happy about the fines. You know, for too long, we've seen so many of our, you know, acts, legislation that's still on the books with a meager fine. And so it's almost, people look at us as if we're not taking, as legislators, the seriousness of what is happening in our country. And so I'm particularly happy that the fine of what used to be $10,000, a meager amount of money, $10,000, will be moved to $1 million. And also, as far as jail time, we will see more of a jail time for persons who, you know, commit these kinds of violent acts. I am also excited about Section 2B, where persons, and as my colleagues also mentioned, that other persons, a third party, can report what is happening in a community. I think for most of us, I know I've actually witnessed, you know, persons being beaten. Your next door neighbor, they might be afraid to make a report. As members of parliament, I know that most of us have had persons, especially women, the women are more, you know, they're going to confide in us more to come and tell us about a beating that's happening in the constituency, in their home. They are afraid of reporting. They might not have the means to leave. You know, they're dependent on that spouse, that person that they're living with. And so I am happy about this third party clause so that persons can actually speak on their behalf to tell the police and to make that report as to what is happening. And so I will also urge my constituents, and you know, we know that we still don't have enough domestic violence, we don't have enough shelters. And I know that the minister, you'll be working very hard to get more shelters, because if it is that we're asking our constituents to speak up about domestic violence, many times they have nowhere to go. They don't have the means. And so we have to make sure that we're providing that kind of support. And, you know, my colleague, she mentioned about possibly one person in here. I'm sure there's not just one person in here, but there are possibly many persons in our parliament who have possibly put their hands on a woman. And I would urge for us to desist from that. And I would urge our women also that loving a person, if a person loves you, they will not put their hands on you. It is just that simple. That is not love. And so I would urge my fellow Jamaicans that if someone is hitting you, they do not love you. Report it to the police and get help. There is a helpline. There is a helpline to reach out to, and I would, tell my constituents to make sure, come to me or to reach out to the helpline. And so, Madam Speaker and Minister, I look forward to the Joint Select Committee to see this bill amended in full and to put the proper things in place to make sure that our women and our men are protected. I thank you.
No, I didn't speak before. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I see a puzzle on your face, but I have not had any intervention in this particular discussion. Originally, I really was not going to speak, but I thought that I should, I thought I should add my voice. I wanted to support the amendments that are currently before us. I believe that many Jamaicans are pleased to hear that we are here today making those amendments, and I know they would be further pleased as well that we are establishing a Joint Select Committee to look at a more comprehensive review of the legislation. It is something that all progressive Jamaicans have been calling for, and there are a number of issues that are outstanding. Madam Speaker, one of the things that I would want to make sure we remember, in all of what we do, we always still seem to be behind with the kind of public education that is required for the specific legislation. We also don't do well at post-implementation review so that we can see the gaps based on experience, and so that that can also identify some of the changes that we want to make. And I'm hoping that as we move forward with the issue of domestic violence being as serious and as critical as it is, that these are some of the things that we'll make sure we look at as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister? Minister?
So, Madam Speaker, I really want to thank the members of this House for the support, and I also want to thank the technical team that fall under the direction of the Ministry and Minister of Justice, as well as the Minister of Constitutional and Legal Reform. And just to say that in wrapping up our discussions, I also want to thank the Jamaica Constabulary Force, which has been doing an excellent job in assisting in creating what we call the pathway, a seamless approach in government in treating with domestic violence and in assisting survivors as well as victims. The Spotlight Initiative program, which has given us a lot of support, financial and institutional support, closed off a couple days ago. And I was really happy to join my colleague minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, in launching the domestic violence entity that treated with the program where survivors will now have a safe space and a private space at the police stations where they can report and they can feel safe in making those reports. I also want to thank the Ministry of National Security for doing the due diligence on the members of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. And Madam Speaker, I'm really very happy today that in closing this debate, I can in fact announce the members of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. And the establishment of this tribunal is an independent body with jurisdiction for the enforcement of the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act 2021 as mandated within the legislation. And this tribunal is to be comprised of members who are considered to be fit for appointment based on defined eligibility criteria, including the possession of qualifications and experience which suitably demonstrates their capacity to effectively manage the dispute resolution process. And so, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to announce to this Honorable House that the Ministry of National Security has provided a favorable response to my request, refit and proper vetting. Approval has been granted for the 14 members of the tribunal following against the proposed members of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. And those members are Mr. Ferdinand Algernon Smith, who will be chairperson, Mrs. Indira Persad, deputy chair, Mrs. Karen Campbell Basco, deputy chairperson, Ms. Janetta Smichael, attorney at law, member, Ms. Camille Lee, JP, trained and certified mediator, a member, Ms. Karen Wilson, trained and certified mediator, Ms. Claire Miller, trained and certified mediator, Mr. Kevin Campbell, trained and certified mediator, Mr. Danny Roberts, member, Mrs. Debbie Ann Brown Salmon, member, Ms. Shanique Clacken, member, Reverend Devon Dick, member, Ms. Kadria Folks, member, and Mr. Junior Latibadir, member. These persons will comprise the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. Madam Speaker, I want to thank these individuals for agreeing to serve, and I would ask the House to show their appreciation. So, Madam Speaker, as we close out, I want to indicate that we have come a long way. And through the Spotlight Initiative Partnership, we were able to establish the Sexual Harassment Act. We were able to train persons who would support the structure. We were able to establish 2 shelters. Pardon? Yes. Yes. And that's all right. That's all right. It is important to state within what context that we are now recommending the amendment to the Act, and to say that we have come a long way, and we have provided institutional strengthening, and we have provided the systems to ensure that we're able to follow through on these pieces of legislation. So in wrapping up our discussions, let's reflect on the essence of the Act to amend the Domestic Violence Act 1996. Today, we have traversed the landscape of justice and societal evolution with a view to making a difference in the lives of our sisters and brothers who are affected by the scourge of domestic violence. It's in high places as well as it is at the grassroots level. And we must be mindful how we conduct ourselves and how we ensure that those around us do not abuse our women, our girls, our boys, and even our men. This is indeed a watershed moment and an affirmation of our commitment to compassion, resilience, and responsiveness, which are critical to achieve gender equality, equity, and social justice. The changes which are proposed are shaped by the wisdom of the committed and dedicated members of the Joint Select Committee, which was set up in 2016 and reported in 2018. The changes will extend the parameters of protection beyond traditional boundaries to encompass a broader spectrum of relationships. In Section 4, we have fortified the court's ability to shield against various harms from harassment to property damage and beyond. Clause 4 sends a very clear message, and those who have ears, let them hear. Today, it's not just a legal adjustment. It's a strong statement about safeguarding personal security and is indicative of the government of Jamaica's position on citizen security and safety. Madam Speaker, I should say super ecstatic that this bill provides me as minister with the flexibility to update penalties, expand our legal armory to be super responsive in the face of evolving challenges. As we conclude, I urge each member of this House not just to observe the amendments, and I will repeat, I urge each member of this House not just to observe the amendments, but to embrace the transformative power within this bill. Don't be silent if you know it's happening. Don't be silent if you know it's happening. It goes beyond the legal jargon. It's a promise to fortify our societal fabric with justice, protection, and compassion. Let this bill be a beacon, guiding us towards a future where the shadows of domestic violence are replaced by the resounding chorus of protection, empathy, and unwavering commitment. Madam Speaker, I extend my sincere thanks to all and for your consideration. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now ask for a second reading of the bill.
Question is, the bill be read a second time? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Clerk.
A bill shortly entitled the Domestic Violence Amendment Act 2023, read a second time.
Thank you. House Leader, there are some general recommittals. I'm going to take committee here, if that is okay with the members. If you're fine. Yes, Marshall, you may go ahead. We are now in committee, members. The House now resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. Minister, would you be so kind as to guide?
Madam Speaker, I beg to suggest that the clauses be taken en bloc. But I think we've gone through the amendment in the essence while we debated. Unless there's any specific area that any member wants to. All right, Madam Speaker, the preference then.
Are the members, well, let me put it.
Clause by clause.
Clause 1. I put clause 1 as amended. Are we going to read the amendments? Minister, how do you want to proceed? So I'll put first the amendments to clause 1. Those in favor? Minister?
Madam Speaker, Minister Malahoo Fort will walk us through the clauses.
You're so generous. I like the Christmas spirit. Member Fonse. Madam Speaker, Clause 1 is to be amended in accordance with the amendment sheet, and the clause is to read that the bill is to be read and construed as one with the Principal Act.
Those in favor of the amendment?
Added.
I have a question. I have a question on the proposed amendment. Given the nature of what is being done with this bill, the amendment, the type of amendments being made, why is it that we are having a provision for the bill not coming into effect until the minister makes an appointment day notice? Why is that necessary? That isn't clear to me why we have that. As opposed to once it's GGs are sent, it's given, it becomes law, and it's gazetted in the Gazette.
There are some administrative matters we have to ensure. So the minister will determine the date when it will become effective. It wouldn't delay it.
Flow from these amendments? Those administrative matters flow from these amendments? Increasing fines and...
Remember, we have to communicate with the various entities and to make sure everything is in place so it can flow. It's a tidier approach. All right?
Clause 1 is to be deleted and substituted as follows. This act may be cited as the Domestic Violence Amendment Act 2023. This act may be cited as the Domestic Violence Amendment Act 2023, shall be read and construed as one with the Domestic Violence Act and all amendments thereto, and shall come into operation on a day to be appointed by the Minister by notice published in the Gazette.
Those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Those in favor of clause 1 as amended?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 2.
Madam Speaker, as indicated on the amendment sheet, clause 2 is to be renumber clause as clause 2, sub 2, and insert the following as subsection 1 of clause 2. 1. Section 3 of the Principal Act is amended in subsection 1 by inserting next after the words, in accordance with this act, the words, or make any other order as the court considers just in the circumstances of the case.
Madam Chairman, I have one question on clause 2 and its amendments. I had proposed that, I don't have the bill before me from last week, but I had proposed that the list of criteria or types of orders that can be made would include an order prohibiting...
Not to communicate.
Communication or interaction, because I know that can be an issue with somebody who is, maybe unbalanced, maybe aggressive, and the victim really doesn't want to have anything to do with them whatsoever. I wasn't sure why that had not been taken on board.
Yeah. On behalf of the Minister, just to indicate that on reflection, that could be enumerated, but there are other matters that may be considered appropriate depending on the dispute between the parties before the court. And so it is safer at this time to enable the court to make an appropriate order which could specifically include the one that you have suggested regarding communication, if that would be part of the solution to the problem that the court is adjudicating upon.
Well, all of the list in the bill are options available to the court, and they specify specific things that the court can order. We're adding a catch-all provision here. I have no objection to that. But I just thought, because interaction and communication is quite not only a fundamental thing, but something that maybe in the absence of being specifically stated in the law, a judge may feel reluctant to impose it. So I think Parliament ought to send that signal by saying it specifically. But I'm not going to belabor the point. I just wasn't sure why it had been not taken on board.
But just to say, in other areas of the law where the court is empowered to attach conditions or make appropriate orders, that order prohibiting persons from communicating with each other is regularly made. For example, when bail is imposed, and as a condition of the bail, if the accused resides in the same household or in the community or next door, and an issue is live in the case about exchanges, then the court can say, where it is so empowered to make orders as it sees fit, to specify that kind of order. But remember, the bill is going for full review, so, well, the act, yes.
Your mic is not on.
I'll accept what you say in relation to the practice of the courts when granting bail, that the scope of the Bail Act is sufficiently broad in terms of conditions that can be added, that they will make from time to time where they consider it appropriate that kind of condition about non-interaction, non-communication. But, you know, given that this is a different piece of legislation, domestic violence, and there is a specific list of things that the court can do, one of which is harassment, can make an order preventing harassment, which is not defined, and as to what the boundaries of harassment are and when basic interaction becomes harassment may not be very clear. I thought that it would have been helpful to have adumbrated specifically in this context that it can be done. But Hansard is here to record the fact that the government side is suggesting that it's permissible under the catch-all to do it. So, you know, let's hope the judges are mindful of that.
Well, member, be reminded how Section 3 of the Act is worded. Section 3 has Section 1, which tells you what the court can do pursuant to an application under 2. It would require far more restructuring of the provision to provide specifically for what you're asking. But this provision is actually a good provision because it enables a court to make an order that is appropriate in the circumstance of the case, depending on the issues that arise. Yeah.
As I said, I'm quite happy to have the catch-all added. I don't accept that it would be difficult to specifically add what I was talking about in that list, but, you know, so be it, Madam.
But let the records show that this amendment took into account the submission that you made.
Well, yes. Let's hope it does.
Thank you. May I now put the amendments? Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. May I now put clause 2 as amended? Those in favor? Aye. The amendments are documented as well, so would you like to, Huh?
No, Madam Chair, just to indicate that clause 2.2 as renumbered in the new subsection 2A, the word deletes the word of the person and substituted therefore the words who is the prescribed person, as indicated on the amendment sheet. Yes.
Thank you very much, Minister. So, Minister had not yet read the second section. So, the amendment section 1 of Note 1 and Note 2, as per the amendment sheet, we will take both amendments. Those in favor of the 2 amendments to Clause 2? Those against? The ayes have it. I now put clause 2 as amended. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 3, I put clause 3. There appears to be no amendments. I put clauses 3 and 4. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Members, Minister Malahoo for it? Okay, that's exactly where my headspace was at. Thank you. Members, I do report the bill as having passed committee stage with 3 amendments. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Marshall, we are back in the House. Before Marshall, we are now back in the House. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage with 3 amendments. Minister? Minister, no, he did his job already a little bit ahead of time. Minister, you still have a comment to make? Minister, you are needing to ask one more item.
Madam Speaker, I now ask for the 3rd reading of the bill.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Clerk?
A bill entitled an act to amend a bill entitled an act to amend the Domestic Violence Act read a 3rd time and passed.
No, wait.
We will have recommittal, but since we're still at public business, we will take Minister Chalk's approval for the IC's resolution. Right. Go ahead, Minister.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, this is a fairly straightforward resolution, so I now ask that the motion be approved.
Turn your mic on. Yes, thank you.
Madam Speaker, I just wanted some clarification on this. So this resolution is to approve an order made under the Integrity Commission Act, Section 39, 2 to be precise, in which the threshold for triggering the obligation of a public official to file an annual declaration of their assets, liabilities, and income is being increased from where it is now,
3.5,
which I think is $3.5 million, to 12 million. That's obviously a very substantial increase. That's a 300% increase. We seem to be specializing in 300% increases this year. So the question I have is, how many people will be impacted by this? How many people who currently have that obligation to complete and file their declaration will no longer have to do so That's really my... And what was the basis of the 12 million? Was the 12 million based on the number that you're trying to take out of the obligation, or was there some other thinking behind fixing it at 12 million? Because obviously, it's not an inflation adjustment. You know, it was set at 3.5 million in 2018, which is 5 years ago. So if you were adjusting it for inflation, it would be a much more modest adjustment. So I'm interested in hearing from you on that.
Leader of the Opposition, when the Oversight Committee met with the Director, Craig Beresford in particular, indicated that with this increase, instead of 30,000 declarations, it would be reduced to about 10,000, or just that. Right. That doesn't mean that all 10,000 will be examined, because in our interaction indicated that on average about 1,000 declarations are examined. Now that doesn't stop. Less than 1,000 are actually examined. But note that there are certain categories: parliamentarians, many councillors, police, JDF, a number of persons, notwithstanding that they're on the 12 million, will still have to file. Police, Jamaica Defense Force. I think all judges are now over 12 million. So they will have to file. The parish judges, not yet, but may well be. No, the position anyway.
My recollection of it is that the law allows an order, I think it is, to be made to extend the requirement to file to specific categories of persons, notwithstanding that they fall below the threshold. So there ought to be a list in some prescribed instrument which sets out who it is has to file, even though they're below the threshold.
No, that is correct, Leader of the Opposition. What is important is that the IC can always ask a group or an individual to file, notwithstanding the threshold. I think so. But in fact, they can look at the risk. In fact, you know, Leader of the Opposition, as you know, the Integrity Commission Act is going through an overhaul. And these are some of the matters which we really need to look at. Because it is just unfortunate, Leader of the Opposition, that people are being asked to file. And even with the reduction to 10,000, they actually review less than 1,000. So people are declaring for archives. So Madam Speaker, if the position is that what is important, Madam Speaker, is the IC have asked for it to be moved to 12 million, and we are approving it.
As we call it. Section 39, I think it is, 3, says that this is notwithstanding subsection 2, regulations made pursuant to this act may contain provisions requiring public officials who occupy posts as are prescribed, i.e. in the regulations, to submit a declaration pursuant to subsection 1. So it has to be done by way of regulations. And I think under the act, the making of regulations is not exclusively within the province of the commission itself. I would imagine there would be some parliamentary oversight of that. So when I asked which categories of persons are not presently exempted, even though they're below the threshold, it's because I wasn't aware that any regulation had been made to do that. I have not seen it. Yeah. So I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying I hadn't seen it, and I was interested to know which categories may have been benefited, that's perhaps not the right word, be compelled to file, notwithstanding that they're below the limit, whether the limit is 3.5 as it now is, or 12 as it will be after we pass this. But it's not clear to me that there is any regulation in place yet. Yeah.
In the schedule list, I don't know.
Madam.
You want to say something?
Madam Speaker, just for clarity, Madam Speaker, just for clarity, the change that the House is being asked to affirmatively resolve is a change that was proposed by the Integrity Commission. The submission was made by the Commission to the Joint Select Committee reviewing the bill and also to the Oversight Committee, and the recommendations were accepted in the light of the adjustments in the public sector wages and all of the other issues that arose during the deliberations of the committee. And this matter is coming further to the power where the minister may by order publish in the Gazette, subject to affirmative resolution, amend or vary any monetary, not just a monetary penalty, but amend matters in relation to the schedule, Madam Speaker. But the clarity, this is in respect of the limit that is being amended, and just for clarity, this is a recommendation which was made by the Integrity Commission and accepted by the committee reviewing the bill. And in light of what is coming up for the declarations at the end of this year, the matter was brought forward.
Madam Speaker,
The challenge we're having opposition leaders, so many mics are.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The genesis of this amendment, which is the recommendation that came to the Oversight Committee from the Integrity Commission itself, is one thing, but the fact that it has to come here for approval indicates that we are required to understand it and to approve it. It's not a rubber stamp, right? So, hence my questions, because I'm interested to know how that limit was set or reset, what was the thinking behind it, what numbers would be impacted, which you answered. But what is not clear to me is which categories, other than which categories that fall under the threshold of 12 million going forward will be required to file a declaration. And I'm not convinced that the answer being put forward is one based on an actual knowledge of the facts, because the mechanism for requiring a public official whose salary is below the threshold to have to file is a specific regulation that has to be made to do that under 39.3. And I haven't seen any regulation come here to do that. So I'm interested to know which categories, because it's not even mischief, it's to make sure that we know exactly what the ramifications are of this massive increase in the threshold, which is something which the Integrity Commission itself has asked for. So that's clear. And you've indicated the numbers that they have told you in the committee would now be freed of the burden, so to speak, of having to file, and they in turn would be freed of the burden of having to scrutinize. But it's still important, I think, to know that, because there are many, many categories of public officials whose salaries are going to be below 12 million. And which of them will be obliged to file and which won't is relevant, because some of them are higher risk, I would imagine, of being susceptible to that type of influence than others, based on the type of work they do. So that's why I want to know which categories are so prescribed now. But I don't think we have that information today, ma'am. Yeah.
Madam Speaker, in the cotton trust, in the exchange, the minister indicated that the commission itself could direct and ask someone to file. Now, if my understanding is that I would like the minister to clarify that his understanding on that, or appoint us to to the bill, because that's not my understanding as to whether that the commission have that power to do that without the regulation.
Madam Speaker, a fair amount of the information that is being requested is purely hearsay from the discussion we had with Oversight Committee. So I don't want to say firmly that these. So what I would do is to indicate that the information will be forthcoming, but what is important is for us to approve this resolution so that persons who are on the 12 million won't have to file for next year. So the other information that the members asked for, we will hope to get to the Parliament in due course.
Minister, in closing your statement, before you take your seat, would you close by also asking that the resolution be approved by the Parliament? Go ahead, Minister.
The position is before I will ask for the order to be approved, but also to indicate by the next sitting we will ask for some clarity on the questions you have asked. So I now ask for the order to be approved.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader? We have some recommittals. House Leader?
Madam Speaker, the final item on the public business has to do, of course, with the measure that the Minister of Finance will take now. At a later point, I'll ask for the recommittals in relation to it. Madam Speaker, the matter for public business has been exhausted in this context. We therefore ask for a recommittal of two items. One, bills brought from the Senate to allow for the Minister of Agriculture to accept the bill and to ask for its approval. May it please the Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. The question is that we recommit bills brought from the Senate. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister of Mining, Agriculture and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, I now ask for your consent for the Senate amendments to a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Agricultural Produce Act to be now considered and approved.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, the amendments have been read out and circulated and are straightforward. Unless there is any other comment on it, Madam Speaker, I would ask for the Senate amendments to an act to amend the Agricultural Produce Act to be now approved.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader?
Madam Speaker, I now beg for the recommittal of the item presentations of bills without leave of the House first obtained to allow the Minister of Finance to take the first reading of the Financial Administration Act as amended. May
Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move to introduce... No. Sorry, Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take first reading of a bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Number 3, Act 2023.
Thanks, Minister. Members, the question is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the Minister to take the first reading of the bill. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Madam Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Number 3, Act 2023 be read a first time.
Thanks, Minister Clark.
A bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Number 3, Act 2023 read a first time.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, it's not intended to do any further business for the day. The Leader of the Opposition quite correctly intimated for the year, calendar year that is. Madam Speaker, before the motion of adjournment, I'd like to just express the sentiments, I think, of both sides of the House, of the appreciation that we have of the work that you, Madam Speaker, have done during this session, and particularly the work of the staff led by the clerk of the House. Certainly, Madam Speaker, it has been a very strong session. We went through primarily the state of the constituency debate and heard from members representing various concerns from their constituents to not just this honorable House and to the nation, but certainly to the Ministry of Finance and the framers of the appropriations bill that will come to the House in the next session of Parliament in 2024. Madam Speaker, we have stuck very religiously under your guidance to protocols in relation to the management of the House, for which we really are pleased the fact that the discipline of carrying through our business in this House has been upheld in a very strong and powerful way, and it is to your credit that this honorable House has discharged its duties with assiduity and also with a commitment that enabled our constituents to feel that their interest is well served in this chamber. Madam Speaker, as we now approach the season of goodwill, the season of cheer, and reflect on the nativity as well as the purpose of the nativity as we celebrate them in Christendom, we are drawn to the fact that this whole consideration is born out of love, it's born out of affection, it's born out of a feeling of warmth towards each other and reflected in one nice word, goodwill and cheer. And we want to extend that goodwill, certainly from this side to that side. And I'm sure when it is reciprocated, we will then be able to say we're extending that goodwill to the entire nation. We want all of us to have a very peaceful, very happy, and celebrating Christmas. Yes, let this Christmas reflect the fact that we give thanks to God for prosperity. We give thanks to God for health and for strength, and that we also are giving thanks for building relationships, because that's what the whole process is. It's in the strength of relationships that we build a strong nation, and that we will learn even more from the fact that this is a season of giving, and we will give and give and give more of ourselves. Madam Speaker, in closing, I'd just like to indicate that this Honorable House when we asked for the suspension of the sitting, indeed, for the suspension of operations for this particular session, that we will come back somewhere in the mid of January, the second week in January, the date we will be indicating appropriately in time, but for the purpose of this resolution, we will ask for a date to be fixed, as is customary. But we want members to come back refreshed and to come back knowing that this next session, we will be dealing with some private members' motion, as we had indicated, and we also will be dealing with the matters of the appropriation budget as will be presented. May it please you, Madam Speaker, as we then say in the traditional words, a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all our members.
We will now hear from the Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to join with the Leader of Government Business in wishing everybody, our staff, the Parliament, and colleagues, all the best for the season. The Leader of Government Business, if he's going to give me 30 seconds more. Oh, yes, but he needs to... Yes, the speaker is trying to get your attention.
Minister Clark, a moment, please.
Oh.
I would love to hear the Leader of Opposition Business, so I listen while I ask Minister to approach.
Yes.
Go right ahead, Member Paul.
Please be easy on the Minister. the Leader of Government Business. Yes, it's very respected. No, I think 30 seconds. We're one, and if there's a little bit more allocation for Christmas, but that appears not. So I want to, as the Leader of Government Business has preempted me, mention one area of discord, and I put it like that. Because, Madam Speaker, sometimes we see public business as government business. And I just want, with your assistance in the new year, ensure that we get to private members' motion. And yes, but some of them are time sensitive. For example, the one that was brought by the member from Southwest St. Andrew. It's time sensitive, the matter is current, and I think we have to manage the agenda going forward in a way to take account of some of these issues that are raised and not just see it as, but I'm going to go there, I'm there. No, that is not true, but I don't want us to end on a spirit of discord. No, I am insisting, though, Madam Speaker. I'm insisting, Madam Speaker. For example, the Leader of the Opposition, myself, in fact, a number of us, we have private members' motion on the agenda for quite a while. We should have taken it before. And I would just have to put that on the record. Yes. So, Madam Speaker, a wish that we'll all have an enjoyable Christmas. And see you back in 2024. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, just, you know, in keeping with the spirit of the moment, and we do understand that, you know, the member recognizes that we have been carrying a line with regards to enabling private members' motion on a structured arrangement. And we did say that after the 2 sets of debates that we had, we would go into it. And in my own comment a while ago, I mentioned that that is what we would do in the new session ahead of the prorogation and the budget debates. So, Madam Speaker, just for good order and in the spirit of the moment, I know that the member did not intend any harm in making that kind of comment, nor for it to break the trend of the exchanges that we're having at the end of this wonderful year that we've had. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. House Leader, all right.
Speaker, I beg therefore to move that this honorable House be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Thank you, House Leader. Question is that the House do now adjourn for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This honorable House now stands adjourned.